Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this special edition of the Media Boat Podcast, where it's the end of the year. And as of the end of the year, we do our top 10, top five, top 10, top five lists. My name is Mike. His name is Matt.
My name is Matt. His name is Mike. Thank you for joining us for another year-end wrap up,
See, it's not
year-end
just me.
wrap up. Yeah, I know. It's early. We're doing these in the mornings, which is a poor choice. But this is another one of our year-end wrap up episodes of the Media Boat Podcast for 2024. If you're new to the concept, this is when we wrap up the year that was in a tiny little package for you. We talk about the most important news story of the category we're covering, as well as our top five lists, as Mike mentioned. Not top tens. We don't have that much time.
Well,
Uh,
combined, it's the top 10.
yeah, exactly.
Although
You
there's
could
some crossover.
yeah, you could say that unless there's some crossover, which there may be today. Today we are talking about television, the year in television. So we, of course, do this in two parts. We're going to start with stories. We have narrowed it down to a couple of options, and they're going to choose one that represents the year as a whole. And then we'll talk about our top five lists. Then after that, we will talk about one television show that we feel represents the year here at Media Boat Podcasts. So, without further ado, Mike, you have narrowed down our stories, sort of. Not a super strong year in television. What are our options?
No, it wasn't a super strong year in terms of television news, unlike last year where we had the strike going on, which was obvious.
Yeah,
That was what we were going to talk about.
obviously.
This year, not so much, where we had several closing of studios, including Rooster Teeth, and TriStar Pictures.
Hmm.
But we also had the final culmination of Paramount finally being purchased by the Redstone Group.
Yeah.
So, like, those were kind of leading the charge along the way. But looking a little bit deeper into TV news, there was one thing that kind of shook the landscape of TV, mostly in sports television. As
Hmm.
this year we saw several new contracts being inked, and just where you watch sports going to be different moving forward, especially starting in January of 2025, if not already.
Yeah.
Some of this includes the new NBA contract that we followed quite closely just because it was also tied with the inside the NBA crew and
Hmm.
how Charles Barkley and Shaq were retiring and then not retiring and being a part of it and not being a part of it. And
Yeah.
eventually it did end up with a new contract, but it went with Amazon and it's going to go away from TNT and Warner Brothers Discovery.
Hmm.
Uh, but we also get more basketball in terms of ESPN and ABC, and even going back to NBC as well for a time being now.
Yeah.
Um, we even saw over in the NFL this year, Amazon kind of bullying their way into creating a Black Friday game following Thanksgiving because they felt last year that they were cheaped out on a game because they didn't get that Thursday game. So
Yeah.
this year we had the first ever Black Friday game. We just had a couple Saturday games, as well as we're gonna have a Wednesday game because Christmas Wednesday, Christmas on football.
Yep.
So just the shaping of the NFL, also the adding of the extra week, and just how it's being covered
Yeah.
is changing.
Yeah.
Starting next week, there's going to be, sorry, next year, there's going to be a playoff game on Netflix as part of the NFL. Like
Yeah.
that's what's happening now. Like there's so many places where you can watch sports now that it's ever changing. So much so that part of that potential change that was going to happen, but is now stopped. But with a new administration coming in, I think it's going to get pushed through, which is Venue, the joint operation from Disney and Warner Brothers and Fox, or not Fox, Paramount, who will have just a single spot to watch all the sports content.
Mhm.
It did get held up temporarily, but like I said, I knowing what how we've seen this kind of play out 8 years ago,
Mhm.
with consolidation of media landscape, I assume the same thing's gonna happen, and venue will be a go in 2025.
Yeah, I mean the venue thing in itself is kind of the story in a nutshell because it's like what we're watching right now is the transformation of sports being the thing that you got cable for, like the thing that was all reliable, that cable operators relied on for their revenue, that people signed up for, the thing that people keep cable for. We're watching that slowly disappear. It's still true relatively, but like you have giant sports conglomerates now moving away from the cable model. I mean, we've been tracking the Diamond Sports Group stuff on the baseball side of things because of how their bankruptcy was going to severely affect how those baseball teams were put on television. If all of a sudden there's no way to watch your local baseball team, then like that's going to affect you in like a pretty major way, and you have to figure that out. Them going to a streaming model is representative of where I think all of this will eventually go. But you still have some of those holdouts. You still have some of those networks that are still trying to get these rights to these sports like you see with basketball this year. And so yeah, you're right. It's like seems like it's going every which way. Everybody's trying to land grab these sports in their own different ways. You have the cable companies trying to keep things the old way, and you have these streaming upstarts being like, "Well, what if we did it differently? And what would that mean?" And yeah, I think the landscape is different. It's already different, and it will continue to be more different. Like as you mentioned, when a new administration is in charge and consolidation occurs and things get passed, like things get wiggled through alleys that maybe weren't open before. So
Mhm.
yeah, watching sports is going to feel different. It's going to be different. And it's such a staple of television. It's probably the reason why most people still have access to like these services is because people love their sports and they will never stop loving their sports. Yeah.
Right here,
Example
just
example
500
A.
arrows pointing right at me.
Yeah.
I guess the reason why I was a big holdout on cutting the cord and going straight to streaming, because the only way you could watch for a long time sports was through
Yep.
cable because
Yep.
of the regional sports networks. But even
Yep.
then, like you said, Diamond Sports Group technically got a rebranding this year to
Right.
FanDuel.
FanDuel.
Is it FanDuel? Yeah.
Yeah.
So like even that's changing away. Um,
Yeah.
Sports entertainment. I know you don't like to talk about it, but WWE, longtime staple of Fox in the USA, even they are shifting away from what they're normally doing with the SmackDown, Friday Night
Mhm.
SmackDown, going to USA, and your Raw and all your special pay-per-view events are now shifting over to Netflix
Yeah.
and Peacock, like away from traditional TV. So
Yeah. I
it's
think this makes
affecting
sense.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this makes sense. It's a big enough deal and affects so many people that I think this makes sense to pick as a story. Plus, your other stories are more movie stories. Let's be real. Like
Yeah.
Paramount, yeah, they dabble in television, but like really that's a movie story. So yeah, I think that this is the best fit, I think. And yeah, you're right. We're only beginning to see the results of this. I think this will continue through 2025 as we try to figure out where we watch all our sports.
Be interesting as we see currently running the college football playoffs and how the college sports broadcasting is going to be changed as well.
Yeah, yeah.
All
Yep.
right. So yeah, TV sports deals, sports
TV
TV
sports
deals.
deals.
That's our top story of the year.
Yeah.
All right. Well then, let's get into our lists.
Yes.
I went last time, so you're up first.
I guess so. Not a super busy television year for me. I feel like this was a little bit of a an off year personally for stuff that I really enjoyed. Some things ended, some not a whole lot of new stuff really captured my attention, but there were a handful of things just enough to make a top five. So I have created one. Um, And I'll start here at the bottom, which is a surprising bottom for me because there's at one point I thought this was going to be my number one show of the year. But the year went on, news came out. I had some time to think about other shows on this list, and it ended up sinking down to number five. But my number five is something I never thought I'd watch, period. But I did end up watching and really enjoyed, which was X-Men 97.
Really? That's
Yeah,
a shocker
so
for me too.
yeah, X-Men 97. I don't have a whole lot of nostalgia for the original X-Men series, animated series on Saturday mornings in the 90s. I was not an action cartoon guy when I was a kid,
Mhm.
besides Pokemon being the exception, because that's kind of halfway. But yeah, I was pretty much that kid where if you asked me like, oh, if it's not funny, I didn't watch it. I just wanted all my cartoons to be funny. So I didn't watch X-Men or Superman or Batman. But this, Christy turned me on to it because she does have nostalgia for that series, and we watched it together, and I was like, wow, this is really well done. I really liked the writing. I really love the animation. Some of the best television animation in a long time. Disney gave them a budget, like capital B, to work on this thing, and you can tell. I really liked it thematically. I thought it really dug into the themes that X-Men is stellar at, which is, of course, as an allegory for like minorities and for the gay community, and just for reminder of how the oppressed feel and like what are the systems in society like uh, like like how they push the oppressed away, and like how this is like a systemic thing that we all need to be thinking about and aware of. And the X-Men work as a perfect allegory for that. And X-Men 97, I think, did that really, really well. Of course, it's a little tainted now. We didn't know exactly what was going on in the background when this thing came out. All we knew was that the showrunner had been fired mysteriously by Disney. We didn't know why. Later allegations did come out. We found out what was happening with the lead writer and showrunner of the show. And yeah, not pretty, not great. Some non-consensual things happening behind the scenes that were kind of disconcerting to hear about. And so that's why I think this is as low as it is on my list, where like I kind of, as time has gone on, I thought more about it and be like, yeah, I really enjoyed that thing. But now I feel like they're gonna do a season two. They're gonna do a season
Mhm.
two, of course, without this guy's involvement, presumably. And I just don't know what that is because like as horrible as the allegations are and as kind of lame this dude feels, he also was the soul of the show in that first season. So I really wonder, it's leaving me wondering what that thing is going to be in the future. I guess we'll find out. And yeah, so it's like complicated feelings. But then again, what is the X-Men if not complicated feelings? It's like gray area of the show, right? Because like everybody has their complications. Every character in the X-Men feel in the squad, especially in the squad in X-Men 97, feel complicated and gray. Like you can't full like throated like root for any of them because of their complications, because of their humanity, which is I think the point, right? And so it's interesting that that is true of the creators of the show as well. Like we have to remember people are people, they're gonna mess up. That all this that we are flawed inherently, and we have to still just rally together and survive regardless.
Yeah, I think X-Men 97 would have definitely made my top 10. It's not in my top five, just forewarning. But
Okay.
the way that they handle adult things in a
Yep.
cartoon setting
Yep.
that's meant for kids, like even like back in the 90s when it aired, like they were heavy themes involved with this, and they continued that. They didn't shy
Yep.
away just because
No.
it's being revived. And they continued from that previous story here into it as well. Like you said, the animation, beautiful, it's stunning, easy to follow in terms of like all the action sequences, easy to follow in terms of like all the characters and like what who they are and what they do.
Yep.
Even the introduction of some of the new characters as well that you're maybe not be familiar with. Super easy to get invested in them as well.
Yep.
And yeah, just I think the storytelling and the story writing, like as the basis for any animated show, this is like on par with like the best of them. I think you're right
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's strong. But yeah, giant question mark about what the future of this thing looks like. Because
Yes.
who knows? Anyway, moving on to the next one in my list, number four. Again, lower than I thought it was going to be going into it, but I think you'll understand why this ended up at number four. Season three of The Bear.
Okay.
So previously we had The Bear as our number one show last year. We loved season two. It was some of the best television we've had in a long time. And I think that the reaction to season three, um, was mixed. I think you had people on either side being like, "Well, this is not what I wanted from the bear. This is not the kind of storytelling I want from the bear. Like this is like a different kind of pacing. It's like not as like I think people were disappointed coming off the very high highs of season two with, fishes doing what fishes did.
Yeah, fishes and forks.
Fishes and forks back to back. This season didn't really have its fishes. It didn't really have a moment where you're like, oh shit, the bear is back. But it was still the bear. It still had the characters that we cared about. It was just a little bit more low key this time, but I still really enjoyed it. I kind of liked that it didn't just try to top itself. I really appreciated that the writers just kind of let the show breathe a little bit and went zoomed in a little bit more on some of the characters, really thought about where they are and let like little kind of it felt more of like a series of little vignettes, individual vignettes about the characters as opposed to what we had in season two, which was this continued momentum story of, oh God, we got to open up this restaurant. There was none of that. This felt more contained.
Yeah, well, season two had the ticking clock of restaurant has to be open
Yeah,
by this time. Season three didn't really have that, so there wasn't, so it felt like there's less pressure in season three. But
right.
what it did have going for it was the theme of legacy and what
Yes.
it means to have a legacy, leave a legacy, and how you're imposing said legacy, not just on yourself, but also on the people around you. And
Right.
in this case, the restaurant, in terms of like trying to get a review and trying to get a star, which is a stark contrast from the beginning of season two, which was no star. We just want to open. We just want it to be good. To the
Right.
start of season three being, we're going after the star. We want multiple stars now.
Yeah.
So
Which to me makes sense because when we leave Carmi at the end of season two, he's lowest of the low. Like he does not know what he's doing anymore because basically he couldn't even be there for his own opening because of his own negligence and
mhm.
his own ego and his own pushing away of his friends. And I think the most interesting thing is about season three to me is that they don't necessarily try to immediately redeem him. He's kind of irredeemable, and I think he knows that about himself. So season three is a lot about him like thinking about like, oh God, like I'm finding out I'm a monster, basically like over the course of the season up till the end where he has like a real come to Jesus moment. Like he
Well, he
has
has
to
that like
figure
initial he has that final confrontation for his
right.
own demon, only to realize that he's become a demon himself.
Right. He finally realizes that he did the thing. I feel I guess we could spoil it.
Yeah.
He finally confronts, yeah, the person, his devil. He basically the person who caused him the most trauma and pain thinks that that's going to solve everything, and instead it solves nothing. And he has to realize, oh God, I'm the broken thing. I need to fix myself. So I just think that overall, I get why people were disappointed and I understand why people didn't get quite what they were going for. But for me, it really resonated. And for me, I came out of season three being like, yeah, I get why they did it this way. I get why they needed this. Because every story, I feel like, yeah, like modern television, especially streaming, often feels like you have to go up, 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 up forever. And I think I'm happy that the Bear team realized we don't have to do that. We
Mhm.
can go up and then we can kind of plateau for a little bit and marinate, to use the cooking term. Just marinate in the juices for a little bit and figure out what we want to do. It acts as an allegory for the show itself, right? Where it's like
Mhm.
the show itself had such a high and was like such a critical darling that they probably too wanted to figure out what they wanted to leave behind, what the show The Bear means to them. They need to think about that. And season three is them thinking about what are they making, why are they making it, and what is next. And I'm excited to see what's next.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it didn't win the Emmy for best comedy.
Yeah,
That went to Hacks
yeah.
for season two. Uh, but yeah, I think the show was my 5B,
Okay,
and you'll see why when we get to my five.
fair enough. All right, so that's The Bear. Moving on to number three. Uh, Yeah, I'm gonna. Yeah, no,
You're gonna pivot. You're gonna
I
switch
don't
them.
know. I have two. These feel like they're
Too
on
late
the
to be.
same. They're same level for me, but I guess one has to be a three. So yeah, my number three is A Man on the Inside,
Okay.
which was Netflix series that was a big surprise for me. I did not come into this thinking that this would be something that would, one, be on my list, and two, be something that I enjoyed as much as I did. But I was
Yeah, that's
super pleasantly
surprising.
surprised.
That's surprising because we like Michael Schur comedies.
Yeah, we
We
do.
loved The Good Place. It was our
Yes.
show of the year,
Yeah.
multiple years.
Yeah. But I feel like kind of having a surprise like Netflix release. It's not on, it wasn't on AB or NBC. It wasn't like made a big deal like it could have been. And so it did kind of wasn't super on my radar. But once you pointed out that I should give it a try, I did give it a shot, and I had a great time with it. While I don't think it was as poignant and as good as The Good Place, it also is only in its first season, and also hasn't, we haven't seen the full breadth of what it can offer. Um, but I still think that there's that soul in it, which I think so many shows, especially comedies, are missing. And Michael Schur is so good at putting that kind of heart into his shows. And this has so much heart and so much depth in it. I really appreciate a show in 2024 being mostly a cast of seniors, like of older actors who don't get a whole lot of roles anymore. This is a perfect example of television that can still do this. Like, television is still a place where you can have stories about literally everybody, that it's not just young, attractive people. And now that, Ted Danson is old enough to be in that kind of area, he's like the perfect like kind of leader for this group, for this cast. And I think they did a great job of casting really like the perfect vibe of actors for this senior community. And it was a side that like really resonated with me personally because my mother lives in one of these communities, more or less. It's a little different. It's not necessarily kind of like one building where everybody is. It's a more sprawling kind of setup. But the idea of, oh, this is kind of like a second youth for these seniors, and that they just want to party and have fun. I have seen that firsthand visiting my mom in her community, and it's 100% accurate. So when they're like drinking and smoking cigars on the roof, I'm like, yeah, no, that's what these seniors are doing right now. It's a side of, I think, senior living that people don't necessarily see unless they have seen it with their own eyes, like I have. And so it was cool to see that represented on TV. I was like, oh yeah, no, this is exactly like my mom, and make like how she made so many friends in her community. Um,
Now, to be
I've
fair
seen
though,
this.
her community is very niche in
Sure.
terms of the common factor.
Yeah. No, that's fair. But still,
Well,
it
I
was,
don't know. It's not really that niche though. If I more I think about it, it's more
yeah.
wiser. But like getting into it though, into that community is
Yeah.
very special. But yeah, I liked this show. I think what it does by the end is really good, really fascinating. I think it takes what a show that we both love, Poker Face, and have
Mhm.
that kind of mystery like thrown throughout the season.
Yeah.
Um, like helps expanding on it, but keeps it very light, very funny, and like does not take itself too seriously. Like as
Yeah.
soon as you think like you have a crack in the case, nope, another red herring.
Yeah.
And ultimately, like the way this case is solved is sweet in its own right. That there's
Yeah.
no malice intent here. There's no like, oh, you're going to go to jail for this. It's just like you said, a part of senior living that people don't typically see or
Yeah.
may not understand that it's nice to have that kind of light shown here.
Yeah. No, you're right. I think that the hybrid approach here of doing like having a show that's a unique in its way of portraying like an older cast and an older community is also a fun like a fun mystery show at the same time. And I think it does pull off both at the same time, and they weave into each other like pretty naturally. It doesn't feel like it's ever tips too much on either side. And you're right, yeah, like it has like by the time that you wrap it up, it does feel like, yeah, there were some very emotional parts. Like I don't think it's fully lighthearted the whole while. It does kind of delve into some pretty serious themes and some serious themes about death and about especially Alzheimer's. Like if you, I think this show is a perfect example, a perfect thing to show someone who is maybe like unfamiliar with the concept of Alzheimer's or needs to know more about it, because I think it does a very good job of like establishing, okay, a very realistic look at what it means to be a family member who is dealing with somebody who is getting older and forgetting and is losing their memories, how you deal with that, how emotional it can feel, and how, and like, thankfully, I'm someone who has not seen that firsthand, but it's so common it could happen. And so like
Mhm.
I'm glad that there's something out here that's just being very blunt and very forward about this is what it is, it's real, and you're gonna have to deal with it. Some of you are gonna have to deal with it, and this is just what it's like to age sometimes. And yeah, so so yeah, it's lighthearted, but it's also gets those moments of seriousness and gets those moments of emotionality that I think really work. So yeah, no, yeah, I think it would be higher on this list if it wasn't for my top two, because it's just how emotionally resonant it was. And yeah, it was a surprise that I was happy to be surprised by this year.
All right. So then what is surprising at number two?
All right, number two is probably the most predictable thing that had to be on this list. We talked a little bit kind of over the last few weeks about like whether it was going to be on our list and like whether we were going to finish it in time. And like, well, I did finally end up finishing it. It was I had a roller coaster experience with this show, but I'm glad that I finished it and I'm glad that I did it. My number two is Shogun. Um, which yeah is probably going to be number one on everybody else's list this year. Like it swept the Emmys already. Like it's already like the critical darling in 2024. This is the television show that nobody could shut up about. But I get it. I get why. Like this is a unique thing that I don't like. I don't understand how they made it. Like, you know what I mean? Like this
Yeah.
is kind of a weird television miracle because we don't do television like this anymore. It feels like a relic of a past that doesn't exist anymore. Like I think it's something that the advent of streaming has largely pushed away, like a prestige, expensive, beautiful looking, serious, like very like a show that takes its time, a show that is honestly very slow, very like precise. It's not flashy. It's not, it doesn't do the Netflix thing where that's become so standard, which is, oh well, it's episode 7. We got to have our big twist now. It doesn't bother with any of the expectations, these modern television expectations that we have. It instead is adapting a book and it's staying to the book. And I'm glad that it did because it feels very much like a novel. It spends it so much time like with its character and its world and its themes that by the time you're done, you're like, oh, I feel like I just read a giant book. Like that's the vibe of it. But again, it takes advantage of its medium by being probably the most beautiful television show I've seen in a very long time. Just like so many of the shots are just amazing looking, like the beauty of Japan, like in every frame of this thing. And the character work, the acting is just stellar. The fact that this is a show that's like 80 to 90% in the Japanese language and is in subtitles, it demands that you pay attention to it. It does not have patience for someone who is like, I'm just gonna casually watch this. No, no, there's no casually watching Shogun. I learned that the hard way. Like, no, you cannot watch this show while being on a phone. It demands you to pay attention to it. Again, rarity in modern television, right? It's just doing so much, but I think the number one thing that really stayed with me is how dedicated it is to its themes, how dedicated it is to just this discovery of its culture clash almost. Like it's very like that's kind of the reductive way of putting it, right? Is like fish out of water story about this English guy and this Japanese culture. But part of the process of him being the fish of the water, the fish out of water, is learning just how stark those differences are and how literally it literally boils down to their belief about the preciousness of life, right? Like English culture and Western culture is so centered about like life is so precious. Like while you're here, it matters. Like if you die, that's it. Like, or if there is an afterlife, maybe we don't know what it is. It's so centered on being alive and what it means while you're here. But Eastern culture, especially Japanese culture, is very much like, but death means something too. Like death is important. Death is a symbol. My life is only worth what my death is worth to a certain extent. And it really delves into how that makes him uncomfortable. This person coming from this Western point of view does not understand this. And so the face off you have between these two very central like dogmas about what it means to be alive is the core of the show. And it does all of that by also being this like to have all this crazy action, all these war scenes, and this like political intrigue that maybe didn't work as well for me as maybe some people. But when it goes back to the characters and it goes back to the themes, it has me wrapped. I am just staring, like I'm just like, yeah, okay, I want to know what happens. Oh, what is she gonna do? Like, oh, they're having this like tense conversation with her ex with her husband, and oh, they're gonna like have this drinking competition because they're pissed at each other. It's like that's when the show is at the best. It's like these character moments and these like really like tense moments of like culture like facing staring down each other, and it's like yeah, just quality television. I get why people love it so much. um just a special thing that I'm it's a miracle that it exists.
Now, yeah, I know just like me, you couldn't watch this when it came out on a weekly basis. And because it won the Emmy and because everyone couldn't shut up about it, you eventually went back to it.
Yeah,
So why, I guess, I guess that's the difference between number one and number two is why
yeah.
was it such a, so why did it feel like a slog to get through though? Because you said like you were stuck at like episode 3 or 4 for a while.
I think it is because of how much it demands your attention. Like I said, I think we've become, I mean, yeah, like I'm not somebody who's like, throw out your phone, focus on real life, touch grass. I'm not that person. Like, I welcome technology to a certain extent, but I also know its limits. And I know my limits. And I know that I am just like a lot of people. And I am, someone who, if I am drawn to my phone, I'm going to check my phone during something and it's going to distract me from the task at hand. I am human. Like, I have flaws. So something like Shogun that demands your attention is going to create tension there, and it did for me. And so yeah, it took me a while to get through it. And it wasn't something that I wanted to watch weekly because these are hour-long episodes, and I'm somebody who just like would rather watch something that's 30 minutes to just do it, get it over with, move on to something else. I'm just that kind of person with my television. So yeah, it was challenging, but just like a challenging book, sometimes you get through the end of it and you're like, you know what? I'm glad I took up that challenge, right? Like I'm glad I did that because I ended up on the other side with this thing that was really poignant and meaningful to me. And so yeah, sometimes that challenge, that hump, it's worth to get over to get to the other side of it.
Hmm. Well, I mean, I'm glad it's this high up on your list. But like I said, it's only number two.
Yeah.
So
Because
what was better than Shogun?
well, I don't know if it was better. Again, I think it's important that now that I mentioned that my top five is not necessarily what I think is better. It's more like what
Okay,
my favorite things
what did
were.
you enjoy more than
Yeah.
Shogun?
And this is my most self-indulgent moment I'm going to have. Like, let me have a moment for something that's just for me. Not just for me, but it felt just for me. My number one is from all the way back in January. It is Pokemon
Pokemon
Concierge.
Concierge.
I'm sorry. As soon as I saw a single scene of this thing, I was like, yeah, that's it. That's my number one show. It could not be. This thing's like literally was like a gift wrapped to my 9-year-old self. And I got to open, yeah, sure, I didn't get to open it until I was 34, but I'm glad that I got to open it because I love the idea of the show. I love the vibes of the show. I love how it just feels like a cozy blanket that I can wear. The animation is so beautiful and so wonderful to look at, especially in HDR and a 4K TV. In fact, if you haven't seen it on your new TV since you watched it the first time, you should come back to it just because the HDR it's a summer day on your television show. It looks beautiful.
I probably will because they did
Um,
order a full season of this. Now, little caveat though on your pick here, and I think you know what I'm
yeah.
going to say.
Hmm.
Pokemon
It started
Concierge
in last year, but it
premiered
finished this
on the
year.
31st.
Yes, I realize that, but that still counts because our rule is if it ended in the calendar year 2024, it counts as a 2024 show. That's our
Yes,
rules. So
yes.
anyway, but yeah,
It's also
so
why
like,
like Squid Game 2 will not be on our list
mhm,
this year.
right, although it wouldn't have been anyways. But yeah, so like, yeah, so even though I don't think it's objectively better than any of the other shows on this list, I just am so comforted by the idea that other people want to see stories in the Pokemon world that are not just about trainers, that are not just about battles. I love the idea that we're finally seeing Pokemon media that says, no, this is a living, breathing world where people work and live with Pokemon in other ways. And like I said, it's like little 9-year-old me, that's all I ever wanted. Like I literally wrote Pokemon fan fiction in my teens because I wanted to talk about the part of the world that wasn't represented in Pokemon games, television, any of that. Like I wanted to talk about like, yeah, but what about the people who are just like working in the hotel or people who work at a cafe or people who work in the gym that are not the gym leader? Like that's kind of storytelling captured my imagination early on as a kid, and I wanted to know more of that. I saw you see peaks of it in Detective Pikachu, the movie. You see like, oh, this is a city where people live and work with Pokemon in other ways. But even the movie kind of goes back to the old standard of, oh yeah, but we end up in this battling ring because that's what we know we really want to see. Like, well, you didn't have to do that. Like, and so something like Pokemon Concierge gives me hope that the Pokemon Company knows that too. Is like that there's so many other stories you can tell in that world, and they can be just cute coming of age stories about somebody who's figuring out their place in the world with Pokemon. And that's all this was. And that's all it needed to be. It doesn't need to be this huge, big, epic, super emotionally poignant thing. To me, it was worth it just to see someone like having emotional moments with Pokemon, living with Pokemon, and being like bettering themselves at the end of a character arc. That's all I needed. And it did that. And I loved it.
Yeah, it's a short 4 episode arc, but did get picked up for a
Hmm.
full new season that should be
Yeah.
coming. I think it's in 2025, if not 2026.
Maybe later though, because it is a stop motion show, it takes a
Yeah.
little longer to create. This is especially interesting considering news we just heard a couple weeks ago about the Pokemon Company teaming up with another stop motion studio, the arguably way more famous Aardman. Who knows what that's going to be? But like, it makes me happy that we're not going to get just one, but two different stop motion Pokemon animated things. So
Yeah.
just
Well,
I'm
I
just saying I'm
mean, you talk
happy
about
to be
like
living in the world.
the different expanding the world of Pokemon beyond
Yeah.
battling, and that's kind of what the Pokemon Company did with the ending of Ash's journey. Well, not the ending
Yeah.
because still at the end it says to be continued, because his journey never ends. But
Right.
picking up with Scarlet and Violet,
Mhm.
that's completely separate from the previous formula that they've been in.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really cool that they're expanding the horizons, no pun intended, of
Yes.
what Pokemon storytelling can be. Anyway, that's my top five.
All right. What are some honorable mentions then?
I don't have a whole lot, honestly. I just want to do a few super short shout outs.
Hmm.
Um, One thing that just wrapped up, just had its series finale, What We Do in the Shadows. Still one of the best comedies on TV. Well, was, I guess now we have to talk about it in past
Past
tense as
tense.
of this week.
It also was one of your top shows on your
Yes,
previous lists.
it has been on my list before. Didn't quite make it this year, but like, yeah, this season was stellar again. Had another super amazing highlight episode. Um, if you watch it, you know which one. And
Mhm.
yeah, I thought the finale was really well done. I thought it was a just a touch, just meta enough where it was like like just talked a little bit about itself just enough, but not too much to feel overwhelming. And ended on a really cute emotional moment. So like, yeah, I think they did a really good job with it this year. Other shows. Just want to shout out Pop Culture Jeopardy, which has started on Amazon Prime. Despite Colin Jost not always being the best host, it just seems like they just handed him a microphone and was just like, I don't know, ad lib. But besides that, the questions are like pretty challenging, and I'm like having a lot of fun with its format. Like I like the idea. And yes, am I still a little bitter that they didn't choose us? Absolutely, because we
Yes.
would have been better than a lot of these teams, honestly. Oh, Christy is looking at me. Is there something that she wanted to remind me about from television this year? Nothing that I care about, she says. Okay, all right.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
I was trying to
You
invite
could
her
talk
into the
about Great
conversation.
British Bake Off, which I thought we were going to mention was going to be your number one show.
Oh, Christy wanted to mention Elsbeth, the Good Wife
Oh,
spinoff that is currently
yes.
running on CBS. It is also a solving mystery show in kind of a poker face vibe. It's cute. I watched some with her. It's like it's pretty fun. Um, uh, if all the PBS heads out there, All Creatures Great and Small,
Mhm.
also good this year. And yeah, you mentioned Bake Off. Yeah, Bake Off was pretty good this year. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of backups because honestly, like I said at the top, not a super strong television year for me. This was kind of the out of the four categories this year, this was probably my weakest.
All right. All right. Then that leads me into some of my honorable mentions that
Hmm.
didn't make my top five, including Chaos, which I loved, but it's only getting one season.
Yeah.
The finale of The Umbrella Academy, which I didn't quite like how it ended or how short the season was. Also on Netflix, Three Body Problem.
Mm.
It got me interested in that series. I want to know what happens next, but just the way it was formulated felt like it was dragged out. That I was like, okay, maybe it is for me. It's not for me. I like it. It's beautifully shot. It's by the same guys who did Game of Thrones, and I think they have a handle of what they're going to do with it.
Mm.
It just seems at times it feels too sci-fi for me to dive into.
Sure. Yeah.
I also want to do a quick shout out to Iwaju, the Disney Plus
Yeah.
animated series, which I liked up until the finale where it went super Marvel, and I was like, "Oh, you didn't
Yeah.
have to," and yet you did. Just it was felt like this was Disney being like, "You have to follow this formula." I was
Right.
like, "Oh, but you didn't really have to." But if you wanted to be on Disney, I guess that's what you had to do. Quick shout out to Clipped about the Clippers legacy. If it wasn't so close to home, I think it would have made my list. And lastly, Agatha All Along. Surprisingly,
Oh yeah,
how
yeah.
much I enjoyed that.
Mhm.
And looking forward, I mean, I think that's the only like Marvel thing that's like I feel is worthy of mentioning this year.
Mhm.
So with that, that brings me to my top five. And well, as I mentioned before, The Bear is my 5B. Really, my five could just be the
Okay.
two FX shows because Shogun is my number
Yeah.
five at 5A. For all the same reasons you said, but the reason it's here at number five is because it took me until this week to finish it. I made my
Oh
sure
wow.
that I
Yeah.
finished it before this list because like I said, everything you said, like it won the Emmys, everyone's on the list, like, all right, as my duty, I should finish it. And you're
Yeah.
right. Everything you say is correct here. Like
Yeah.
it's beautifully shot. Like I think that's what that gets to me is that a lot of this world building feels lived in. A lot of the sets feel live. The way the camera moves throughout each of the houses and out in the battlefield, like it feels real. Unlike some other shows where, oh, it's a fantasy set. So it's okay if it doesn't like quite make sense, or it's okay if we
Right.
not like super accurate. Like Shogun is accurate down to the minute detail.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about it. I'm I don't know if I'm happy or not that it is getting a second and third season already.
Yeah.
But we'll see because this was originally supposed to be just a one-off show, limited series, but it got did so well that they're making it into a second and third. So we'll see what happens after it. But yeah, I don't think I could say anything else that haven't already said about it. Just the scale, the epicness, the
Yeah.
rivalry. It's great. And yeah, like I said, otherwise I would put the Bear season three here for everything that you said as well. just the whole like legacy aspect, like what it means to like haunt people over the course of this whole season.
Yes.
Just the way it deals with both of those themes, like because they're two sides of the same coin, like your legacy and your haunting of like what's haunting you and what you leave behind for not just for yourself but for other people is really fascinating that they went that way with
Yeah,
season three.
for sure.
But you already talked to death about those two shows. So let me get to my number four show, which I flipped. This was my number three, but the more I thought about it,
Okay.
I switched it to number four because I think number three is a bit stronger. And this is a show that I originally was not going to put on my list, but the more I thought about it and the more weird I thought about it, the more I was like, all right, I know that I like weird, and this show is weird. But this show also
Okay.
has a running theme all throughout it, which is creatives versus the standard versus the industry. It's how do you be creative? How do you be unique in a world that wants you to conform to everything else? And so at number four, I have Phantasmus, from the mind of Julio Torres,
Hmm.
who starred, directed, produced it. Uh, Show I recommended to you. It's only six parts, really short. That delves into like
Hmm.
simple vignettes and offbeat items that slowly over the course of the season, by the time you get to the end, all line up with each other. It feels like one of those like art exhibits where everything looks distorted and kind of one off, but if you line up at just the right angle at the very end, you see the full picture come together. And I really, really loved what they did here with Phantasmus. It's definitely not for everybody, but if you take like any of the like surrealist comedy from it and just like throw it out the window and be like, okay, just let it hit you, you're gonna have a fun time and make you like as as you said about me, see the world in a different view. And I like that about Phantasmus. So yeah,
Okay.
that's why it's here at number four.
Yeah.
Uh Coming in at number three, which I switched, is the second and ultimately final season of Arcane.
Hmm.
It's here because of the goddamn animation. I can't stop thinking about it. Uh, I'm not that big of a League of Legends fan, but I'm a big Arcane fan. I like the world building here. I like what they did expanding on it. I like that it was presented in three episodes on a three-act structure
Yeah.
uh, for those 3 weeks. I really like that as big and grandiose as the overarching storytelling of your A plot, your B, C, and D plot are all interpersonal character dynamics that support everything going on with the A plot. They're not subsequent side stories. They are a part of and what upholds uh the main theme of running through Arcane, which
Hmm.
is your family, your support
Yeah.
structure, not just your own like blood support, but your surrounding support, your friend support. And funny how the one of the least picked classes in League of Legends is support, but that's the main theme in Arcane.
Yeah. Yeah, upon your advice, I did try to go back to this. I found that apparently I still had like my runtime of the first time I tried to watch the first episode of season one. It was still like where it was still like like about halfway through the episode. I'm like, oh yeah. And I think seeing that turned me off of trying it again because I was like, oh, I bounced hard off of this the first time I tried it.
Mhm,
I just don't know if I'm gonna bounce off it again. Like, I don't know. I feel like there's something about that show that like is just a hard barrier of entry for me. But like, I don't know. But I understand when people say how good it is, and like I understand that season two especially got more into those character dynamics, which is probably what I would like more anyways.
mhm.
But I just can't get past the first episode of Arcane. I just can't do it.
Just get past it till they're older. Till your two the two girls are older.
Until
Then
the time jump. Yeah.
yeah, wait till the time jump. Like that's when it
Yeah, I
gets
don't know.
that's
Someday I'll give it a try.
yeah, that's when like all the setup from what you're watching like helps pay off that it establishes those character dynamics of where everyone is and the whole world and city
Yeah.
within Arcane. Well, yeah, just ultimately there's some stuff that can only be achieved through animation. I don't think we're there yet with live action technology. And
Sure.
Arcane kind of proves that, especially with the different mixing of mediums and just the fantastic art direction. I I think it's going to win once again, sweep all the creatives that's entered in, and just superb, superb, but
Okay.
not superb enough to top my two items on the list.
Yes.
Coming in at number two is a you can groan at it. It's a competition series.
I mean, that's fine.
It's fine. It's a Korean competition series, but it's also one of the most uniquely edited, creative shows that forces people to be creative. So,
Okay.
in the same spirit of Physical 100, which I believe was on my top list last year,
Hmm.
comes Culinary Class Wars,
Mm-hmm.
the 50 Michelin starred, well recognized chefs versus 50 unknown up and coming chefs in a culinary battle to basically create the best dish uh, of Korean cuisine.
Yeah.
Although that's even that is with an asterisk because they don't specifically say has to be Korean cuisine. It's based within each like certain rules and dynamics of whatever the challenge is. And the way these chefs get creative is amazing.
Yeah.
I think Chef Edward Lee may be my new favorite chef. He did something completely out of the box bonkers that like as he was doing it, I was like, there's no way that's gonna work. I have no idea what he's doing here. And yet it was amazing what he completed. And just the way it felt was like watching an anime in real life. I know when I first talked about this, I likened it to Food Wars in
Yeah.
their tournament battles, and that's what it felt like I was watching. Just
Yeah.
an animated, quick, fast-paced style show about cooking in this competition setting. It's fantastic. Even
Mm.
if you're not that into Korean cuisine, you will appreciate all these chefs' like knives and skill works and even the different backgrounds for all these 50 unknown chefs trying to make a name for themselves and what they do. One guy literally like used comic books as his inspiration. It was so wild and bonkers of a show that I absolutely loved every single character in there.
That's
Well,
fun.
not character, like chef, but like the characters from the show. It's amazing what they were able to pull together here. And that's why it's
Yeah.
my number two.
Yeah, no, it's the concept sounds fun and yeah, like it's just one of those things that I just didn't have time to get around to. But yeah, I love cooking shows and I love competition shows. So yeah, maybe I'll get around to Culinary Class Wars.
Yeah. Funnily enough, so this show was brought up to my doctor,
Hmm.
and she was like, "Oh yeah, have you heard of this show?" I'm like, "Have I heard of this show? It's my number two show."
Yeah, yeah.
All right, but that does bring me to my number one show of the year, and unfortunately, we probably won't see the show again for another 4 years, maybe 2 years. Let's be honest. But it's a show that's only available for a limited time, only 2 weeks in this year. It's just a limited event. But did I watch every minute of every second, tune in every day to
Uh,
see what was happening? I'm talking about the Paris Olympics, but not specifically the Paris Olympics. I'm talking about Olympic Gold Zone specifically.
See, I totally didn't think that this was eligible for our list, so I did not put Gold Zone on my list, but I forgot to now I realize I should have put Gold Zone on my list.
Yes, Olympic Gold Zone is the NFL Red Zone style whip around
Oh my God.
that covers every single activity happening during the Paris Olympics this year. If there was a gold medal happening, you were instantly transported there. If there's a qualification happening, you were instantly transported there. If there was some amazing shot or feat that just happened, you were instantly transported there. It was 11 hours of wall to wall coverage, 5 a.m. in the morning to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Just absolute bonkers television to capture the full essence of the Olympic Games.
Is it too late for me to change my list?
No, but it's not too late to just automatically crown this as our show of the year.
Man, yeah, Gold Zone. I forgot how good Gold Zone was. I think it's just because summer feels like it was like 3 years ago. Like,
But yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm not talking about like the Olympic Games, the Paris
right.
Games, opening ceremony, closing ceremony. No, like that was fun in and of itself.
Gold
Like,
Zone.
but that is separate. Specifically, watching Gold Zone every day. 5 a.m., turn it on. Just automatically get out of bed,
Yep.
turn it on. What's happening? What's going on? Where's the
Yep.
medal count? What is the current thing that I am like being invested in? I watched so much judo and karate competitions because of this. I watched so much fencing because
Yeah.
of this. I watched so much archery because of this. There's a lot of stuff that the primetime coverage never gets to, doesn't get to, can't
Yeah.
get to, mainly because in the US, primetime coverage wants to cover the US Olympic
Right.
athletes.
Right.
Gold Zone covers all sports, all athletes, anytime it occurred. Just
Yeah.
like finally a way for everyone to watch the Olympics the way it was meant to be. And
Yeah.
not just that, but just Peacock in general having everything readily available live as it happened. Like that's kind of my one beat, just Peacock
Yeah.
coverage of it. But Gold Zone in itself, just oh, so perfect this year.
Yeah.
And they
No, you're
nailed it for
not
the first
wrong.
try.
Yeah. No, you're not wrong. Like yeah, if I totally forgot to put it on here because I again was like unsure about how that would work. So I chose actual television shows instead. But yeah, no, you're right. That's a pretty good argument for it. But
Uh,
yeah, yeah, Gold Zone ruled, and yeah, it probably was the best television in 2024 when we're being real.
more so than Shogun, right? Because
I
that's the only
mean,
that's a crossover.
they're doing
That's,
very different things, is what I would say.
yes, but my only caveat against Shogun is that we didn't watch it week to week. We weren't that
Yeah,
invested until after everyone said that it's the best show. Which, but Gold Zone, we hyped the hell out of
yeah.
Gold Zone.
But I'm also surprised that you don't have a man on the inside here that didn't make your top five.
Like I said when I talked about my thoughts on it, the first
Yeah,
couple episodes felt slow. I couldn't
sure,
quite get into it, but by the end, I liked what it was doing. So I don't know if like because I
sure.
couldn't like because the ending was stronger than the beginning. Maybe that's why it did quite make my list.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Okay, so that is your top five. We've gone through both of our lists. Now I guess we have to choose one show.
Well, it's either art, like I said, it's either Shogun or it's Cold Zone.
I guess Gold Zone is not even on my list.
Yeah, but that's only because you forgot about it and you didn't know if it counted.
Yeah. So
I'm
like, yeah, I
okay
guess
with
we can.
Shogun. I'm good with Shogun then.
You know what though? You convinced me, I think, about Gold Zone. Also, like we can pull the same lever that I pulled with Linkin Park in the music episode. Like, even though it's not on my list, I respect your choice. And I honestly think it feels more fitting for Media Boat Podcast for us to choose that than Shogun. I don't know. We don't have to do something just because every other outlet does it. We don't have to pick Shogun because everybody else picks Shogun. We can be our own thing.
I mean, that's why it's number five and not higher up
Yeah, fair.
on my
So
list.
yeah,
But yeah,
I'm okay with calling it for Gold
yeah,
Zone because like,
Olympic Gold
yeah,
Zone.
it gave us so much. It truly gave us so much this year.
It was 2 weeks of sports content.
Longer than that too, because you know what they kept doing? They kept doing Gold Zone
The
through the Paralympics.
Paralympics. Yeah,
Yeah. I checked. I was curious. I was like, "Oh, I wonder if they're still doing it." Just happened to happen upon Peacock during the Paralympics. I was like, "Oh my God, they're still doing Gold Zone."
yeah.
Yeah. It just kept going.
So yeah, Gold Zone.
Gold Zone. Gold
And
Zone
that'll
rules.
do it. That's our show
It gets our
of
gold medal.
2024. Yes, I like that. Okay. So I mean Olympic Gold Zone is our show of the year, but we are not done yet because we have
No.
one more special episode
Yes.
remaining to come.
Yes, we are not done wrapping up the year of 2024. We will be back with another episode all about the movies of 2024. That'll be a burner, so tune in for that. Where, you ask, can you see all of this? Well, you don't have to go far. You can just go to the usual places. In fact, our video version of these wrap up specials will be on YouTube. on our channel. Just search Media Boat Podcast, and you'll find us in audio form on your regular podcast feed. Just search Media Boat on any of your podcast services. You can also, so yeah, we'll if you are living in the past, you can find them.
If you're living in the
If
past,
you're
I don't know how
living
you're
in
listening to
the
this episode now.
you're living in the future, you can see them all right now. But yeah, they'll be all up in those feeds, so check them out, and we'll see you very soon.
Yep, we'll be back with our final movies episode, unless you are in the future, in which case you can listen to it right now.
All right, bye.
All right, bye.